What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Hangover. I'm your Still Curtain host, Still Curtain Network host, Daniel. Alongside with me always is Shannon. Shannon, how are you doing? How was your weekend?
Well, it was a really nice weekend. Uh, it's in the 80s, which is warm for us here in West Virginia. I know that's nothing compared to what you're dealing with, but
Right.
so we're getting it'll be real muggy and sunny, and then all of a sudden you have a thunderstorm come through for about 15 minutes, and then it gets sunny again, and it's done that twice now. So, uh, but yeah, it's been it was a nice weekend, and I'm looking forward to celebrating the Fourth tomorrow.
Oh yeah, man. Me too. Well, to a certain extent, me and the wife have a couple of dogs, and so usually the firework festivities tend to get them riled up a little bit, and
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
yeah, we're excited about the area we live in. We live outside of city limits, so
Uh-huh.
there's like no holds bar when it comes to the
Yeah,
fireworks.
yeah,
When we first moved here and our first New Year's Eve, it looked like a war zone. There was smoke and
yeah.
everything everywhere. It was amazing, but like I said, the dogs they don't seem to care for it too much. But I'm excited for it. I'm excited for it. Uh,
I got one dog that doesn't like it at all. She gets scared and hides behind the couch, and the other one, the golden retriever, he don't pay no attention at all,
mhm.
and he can even go out on the porch while we watch him because they're going off all the farms around us. They're putting off fireworks, so I don't do it anymore. I just sit out there and watch them. But he couldn't care less.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like every dog's different. I guess
Yep, yep.
I have one that is won't handle it. So it's my females. We have to like turn the radio up super
Yeah, yeah.
loud, and uh, it it is what it is.
Distractions.
Distractions, 100%. Speaking of distractions, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers to distract us about the nothingness that's going on right now when it comes to this portion of the year. Last week, we talked about the running backs and, we talked and discussed and debated our favorite and best running backs of all time that have ever worn the black and gold. Before we get into today's topic, will you tell us a little bit about where we're going to go with this going forward,
Yeah,
Shannon?
when me and you started talking about doing this series of hangovers, because it's just the dead part of the off season, and we're talking a lot of stuff to death, and I'm like, let's do something different. And so we start talking about the all time best. Now, there's some positions you really can't. It's not going to be worthy of a show because let's say middle linebacker, well, it's Jack Lambert. Defensive tackle, it's me, Joe Gray. There's really some positions that the answer is obvious. And then there's other positions that's kind of up for debate. So we even thought about doing wide receiver, but
Right.
there was some of that in an article this past week and a lot of conversation there, and I think it was covered very well. So we decided this week to go with outside linebacker because there's been a ton of great players and it's debatable.
Hmm.
Then next week we're going to do the center position, which the Steelers are renowned for their Hall of Fame centers, and maybe Pouncey will be the next one. Then the following week it's going to be the cornerback position. There's really only two candidates, but it's arguably the two best candidates in NFL history at cornerback, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And then the last show will be the last one before training camp starts, and then we're going to switch gears. But the last show will be about the quarterback position, where we debate Terry Bradshaw versus Ben Roethlisberger, and I think that's the one that's going to get the most impact, make the most impact, because that's an argument waiting to happen. Because it's kind of 50-50 split in Steeler Nation. So I think that's going to be an interesting one as well.
100%, 100%. A lot of people are going to be talking about the results when it comes to, that debate. One being 4 Super Bowls versus two, another being the yards and the attempts and the completions that the younger Ben Roethlisberger had versus Terry Bradshaw. So that's going to be an awesome debate in a few weeks. I'm looking forward to talking it out with you. But as we mentioned today, we're going to be talking about outside linebackers, and there has been the Pittsburgh Steelers are known for their linebackers, and throughout the years, the outside linebacker position has been one that has been a dominant position for the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's been several defensive players of the year, award winners at the position. Uh, several players who have struck fear in the opposition's quarterback. And we're going to talk about that today. So, first and foremost, let's talk about your top 5 linebackers of all time for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll start off with you, Shannon.
Now, I still like to call them outside linebackers. I know it's edge is the term, the modern term, but to me, it was always inside and outside guys. And back in the day, it was a middle linebacker because they only had one in the 4-3. But as far as outside linebackers, my top 5 are Jack Ham, Greg Lloyd, Joey Porter, Debo, James Harrison, and TJ Watt.
Now, are those in order?
Not necessarily. That's just my top 5.
Those are your top 5. Those
Yes.
are your and a great top 5. In fact, my top 5 has 4 of the same people. So, the same would be TJ Watt, Greg Lloyd, James Harrison, Joey Porter. Now, I'm not saying or taking anything away from Jack Ham. I'm fairly positive he was a fantastic outside linebacker. He's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. I've seen some highlights, but I wasn't around when he was playing. And so, for me, I supplemented or I put in Kevin Green. Now, I know he was only here for a short time, but I felt that his impact while he was a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, alongside with Greg Lloyd, Blitzburg back in the day, that was my childhood growing up. That was, I wanted to play defense because of those 2 guys. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, to me, those are my list of top 5. For me, my favorite player to have watched ever was probably going to be Greg Lloyd. The way that guy just hit the opposition and the quarterbacks and the fear that he struck. And, it was during a time when I was playing Pop Warner and going into, school, organized football activities for the first time. And, I wanted to play like him.
Mm-hmm.
And so Greg Lloyd was probably my favorite to have watched. And for me, I think the best outside linebacker that's ever played is probably going to be the one we're watching now in TJ Watt. He's got the sack record. He's got the defensive player of the year. He needs a couple Lombardis. Don't get me wrong, but I think he's on his way. Who was your favorite outside linebacker to watch, and who do you think is the best that you've seen?
Well, I'm older, so I remember Jack Ham towards the end of his career, in the last couple of Super Bowls of the Steel Curtain dynasty there. And Jack Ham, we was talking before the show, the best way to describe him is if you seen Luke Kuechly play inside linebacker, that's what you've seen when you see Jack Ham play outside linebacker. And that he was fundamentally sound and excelled at everything. He had no weakness. He was smarter than everybody else. He was so smooth moving around the field. He was like your first move linebacker that he could match up in coverage. He was a good run defender. He could blitz if necessary. He wasn't physical and intimidating like Jack Lambert, but he was cerebral. And of all these guys we're talking about, none of them approach him for his instincts and his all well-rounded game. The only reason I didn't have Kevin Green on the list is, like you said, he was only in Pittsburgh for a short period. And to me, Green was always more of a 4-3 edge guy, a 4-3 end, or, he was more of just a strict pass rusher. You didn't want to drop him into coverage. His game was more of that one-dimensional. And all these other guys we're listing were more well-rounded. So that's why they, because they also Steelers had Mike Merriweather.
Mm-hmm.
At one time, he was an outstanding player. Almost was defensive player of the year. Had 15 sacks one year. So there's been some guys that have really played, super football for the Steelers. But to me, Jack Ham was the smartest. My personal favorite, will always be Greg Lloyd. I had the jerseys, I had the T-shirts. Avoid Lloyd. I wasn't hired for my disposition. I just loved everything about watching him. The other day, well, it was about a year ago now, but Chad Brown was on a podcast, and they asked him, "Who do you think were the best linebackers, outside linebackers in Steelers history?" And he was a very good one himself. But Chad Brown mentioned Lloyd first, and he also mentioned Debo and TJ. But he said that Lloyd was completely dominant, but he intimidated everybody, even his own teammates. And what people forget is there was a game in Chicago, and the Steelers never win in Chicago. They do not play good in Chicago. And they were losing, and the defense was keeping them in the game, but Neil O'Donnell was sucking big time. And you could tell he seemed like he was scared. He was just like a deer in headlights. And about the third quarter, Lloyd come off the field, and he was pissed. And he went over and got in Neil O'Donnell's face. And it quickly became apparent that Neil O'Donnell was more scared of Greg Lloyd than he was of the Chicago Bears. And he went out and he played much better, and they would come back and won. That is a type of leadership that the Steelers have not had for a good while. There's different ways to lead. But Lloyd, he was so passionate. And, Bill Cowher knew how to use that. He knew how to use that intensity, and he would be able to help Lloyd focus and channel that aggression. And just like Debo, Lloyd and Debo would not be able to play in this game without really adjusting in this area if they didn't really adjust their game, because they were so physical. And if they got a chance to take that knockout shot, they took it. Maybe the ball was a little bit gone, or, but they did. They played that physical. So I agree with you. My personal favorite just to ever watch, and I got to see him play in person, was Greg Lloyd.
Man, I wish I could have seen him play in person. I was a little bit young then and didn't have the control of those type of things at that point. And also living in Texas. They did go play Houston quite a bit back in the day.
Yeah, they did.
That was one of the things that my dad told me, because the first time that me and my dad actually went to go see the Steelers play Houston was against the Houston Texans in 2005, which ended up being the season that the Steelers go on and win the Super Bowl. So it's a fantastic memory for myself, because I get to say I saw the team that ended up winning the Super Bowl. But we had talked about it afterwards. Like, man, we really missed an opportunity to come out here when the Steelers used to go out to Houston every single year. I'll actually be out there this year when they go and play in Houston. I think it's week 4 or so. And so I'm looking forward to that game. Yeah. Looking forward to it. And so, when it comes to Greg Lloyd, and we talk about how he played, during his time, he was a very strong, imposed his will, very fearful, or imposed fear on the opposition. Do you think that would have translated into today's football? Do you think that he would be able to play in today's football, and his style, would that translate today? Or is that something that was of that time, in your opinion?
Well, intimidation was a big part of his game. And like I said, he would have had to really toned it down and adjusted. But we see Harrison towards the end start to adjust. And we've seen that you can still be physical within the rules. And I think that Lloyd, if he got fined enough and everything, he would have been able to adjust. He wouldn't have been as effective. See, Lloyd would have been even more effective in the 60s and 70s because the rules were even more lax then.
Right.
And so, a lot of times guys like, well, they came an error or two too late, but Lloyd hit it pretty much in the sweet spot. Now, James Harrison would have really loved the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And then some guys like Jack Ham would be even more valuable today because as a move linebacker, a coverage linebacker in that well-rounded game, he'd be making mucho money right now. So, again, it's just when a guy plays in what era, what the rules are, what we know it's a passing league now. And teams are starting, like the Steelers are planning on doing it this year, it looks like. They're going to try to take advantage of the fact that teams are built to slow down the passing game, and they're going to try to take advantage of that and accentuate their running game with that solid offensive line and the talent they have with the running backs and tight ends. So it's always evolving. But no, Lloyd could definitely play today. I mean, all these guys that we've talked about could play in today's era because great players, they have that ability to adjust. And we know how smart I just told you that Ham was.
Right.
But also he would have different dietary, different training regimen, chiropractic, all the advantages they have now. The training facilities are incredible. Jack Ham would be even more muscular, more in shape. And people was like, well, he looks small compared to but a lot of those players back then were considered smaller because they didn't have the same advantages they have now.
Right, technology and medical, has come a long way since the 70s, and so and that's translated on the field with higher performance athletes. But you're absolutely correct. It doesn't mean that the determination and the ability to get there wasn't there for those players, and having been given the same opportunity of the same weight plan and things of that nature, they probably would have been at a higher level. So when it comes to the outside linebacker position, the Pittsburgh Steelers have been known as a team to attempt to confuse the opposition by sending blitzes from different places, which would oftentimes make the outside linebacker have to go into coverage. Would Jack Ham, in your opinion, be the guy who is the best suited for that? Is he the best pass coverage outside linebacker that the Pittsburgh Steelers have ever had?
Oh, as far as pass coverage, definitely. I mean, because he was just so smooth, he could cover running back, tight end, some receivers, even back in the day. So his pass coverage, his instincts, fundamentals. We was talking about premonition. I remember a game that against the Bengals, and the Bengals were having some success running the ball, which didn't happen a lot against the Steelers. And they were doing a lot of outside sweep runs, and they were getting outside and doing a lot of chop blocks and cutting down our defensive line. Well, they were setting up a screen pass to the backside to their fullback, and they just kept you knew they were going to do something play action off of this. Well, Ken Anderson, he goes with the fake, and he carries it out, and he turns around, and when he goes to the third of the backside, Ham's waiting on the ball. He's standing in front of the fullback, and he's waiting on it. And then I realized even then at a young age, I'm like, he's a step or two ahead of the offense. And it wasn't like that was a play they run all the time. He just had that feel and that instinct. So you don't see that as much. Nowadays, everybody wants to go for the big hit, the big play. And they thought he would be coming in because nobody blocked him. And he'd be trying to get to Anderson from behind in pursuit. But he didn't. He see what they were setting up. He stopped and just faded back. And that's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of instincts that Ham had.
Yeah, definitely this sounds like probably the best pass coveraging outside linebacker the Steelers have ever had. Just kind of going through my mind and thinking of all the different pass rushers that they've had that have been forced to go into coverage. It's always been somewhat of a mismatch. Not in the Steelers' favor when they've been put in that position. So, I think that you're absolutely right in that situation. I have one more question before we go into our break, and that is, if you could pair up the two top outside linebackers together, what two would you pair up together in their prime?
Oh man, that is tough. Because like I said, just trying to pick which one's the best. We'll eventually have to do that. So far, we've just said who was our favorite.
Right.
But trying to say who's the best is tough enough. But I think if we're talking about in today's NFL, I do think Jack Lambert's coverage skills would be such Jack Ham, his coverage skills would be such a benefit in today's game. And Greg Lloyd or James Harrison in his prime, that's a tough one. Harrison was so dominant, and he was so he was a better pass rusher than Lloyd. Lloyd was a great pass rusher. I remember him coming around the edge sometimes, and he looked like he was riding a wave, that he was in the circle of the wave. I can't remember what you call it, the riptide or whatever, not the riptide, because he would be leaning that far.
Right.
He would get that low, he'd come around that edge and get them sacks and tons of strip sacks. That was the Lloyd specialty. And whereas Harrison did it because he was just so stout and short, and he was built like a center block, that guys were pushing down on him, and he was just going right around them because he was so much shorter.
Right.
But I would have to say probably Jack Ham, and I'd probably have to go Harrison, just because you'd have the one guy for coverage and the other guy for that dominant pass rush.
You see, I completely get what you're saying, and I agree for the most part. But for me, I would put T.J. Watt in that mix, and I would like to see what T.J. Watt and Greg Lloyd could do together. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that would be pretty amazing.
There's no wrong answer.
You're absolutely right. There is no wrong. But I will tell you this: a terrifying answer for the opposition would have been, James Harrison and Greg Lloyd on each side.
Yeah.
That would have been that's a headache waiting to happen, in my opinion. And so, and would have been one that would have been terrifying. But yeah, I think T.J. Watt. And I know we got to see a little bit of that early on in T.J. Watt's career, but I think during the time that both guys were playing, that was towards the end of Harrison's career, the beginning of Watt's career. Neither one of them were in their prime at that point. It would have been nice to have seen them both in their prime, and the damage that they could have done together in that aspect. We got a small glimpse of that, and I thought that both of them did well. In fact, it was James Harrison, apparently, he's come out and stated that he had told the defensive coaches that he felt that TJ should be on the left side versus the right side, because of the way he bends and the way he had a move or whatnot, and that it was just he did something there that he couldn't do on the opposite side, and that's how they ended up working out on both sides. But yeah, no, I think that, like, you're absolutely right. There is absolutely no wrong answer when it comes to those two. But we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to continue this conversation on the YouTube side. Stay right there. On the audio side, we'll be back after words from our sponsors. And we're back. Welcome back, y'all. This is the Hangover. I'm Daniel J alongside with Shannon White. We're talking the great debate on the outside linebackers. But before we get into it, do you have anything coming up for the website or a podcast that are coming out this week that you want to throw out there?
No, just Wednesday night at 8:30 we'll have our curtain call, and we'll going to have a guest host with me, and I'm not sure exactly who that's going to be yet, but I'm sure it'll be interesting, and everybody make sure to tune in.
I heard it was Lady Gaga, but who knows? You're going to have to tune in to find out. Hey, who knows? You're going to have to tune in to find out.
Maybe Lainey Wilson and Duck Hodges.
One of those two. Not both. Yeah.
Somebody a couple, so they could be on. That'd be great.
Somebody will be there. The only way you'll know is if you go check it out. So make sure you like and subscribe. Oh yeah, I don't know how I didn't answer this top of the show or brought this up to you. There's been rumors circulating that Reuben Foster, a former first-round pick, current inside linebacker, I believe, for the Maulers in USFL, apparently had himself a season. There's been talks that he might end up with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Do you see any possibility of that happening there, Shannon?
I read that. I think it was Vince Williams is the one that put it out.
Right.
That he thought it would be a possibility. And if you watched, I didn't really watch the USFL until the playoffs. And then because it was on prime time, and I would sit there and I would catch a little bit of it. And I seen the Pittsburgh Maulers. Right. And he was always such a great athlete. I mean, we're talking about a multi-time All-American in high school. Then he's an All-American in Alabama. And he looked like he was going to be the next big thing at linebacker in the NFL. And he started doing he made some bad decisions from when he was getting his physical at the combine. and made a big deal out of the way he said he was being treated, and he left and didn't do any of the interviews, and he scored a 9 on the Wonderlic test, which I think you do that if you get your name right. I mean, it was just kind of like Carter this year, in that you're seeing a guy with all this talent, but you got to worry about the decision making off the field.
Right.
And in the USFL, he was all over the place. I mean, in the playoffs, he was making plays. He was penetrating. He looked really impressive. He didn't look like he belonged in the USFL. Right. But again, his talent, his athleticism screams NFL, and it always has. And he had some success with the 49ers when they drafted him. But again, he made bad decisions. Just gun charges, domestic violence, marijuana. I mean, it was one thing after another. And when the NFL will give guys like him with that much talent second and third and fourth and fifth chances. And it never worked. Eventually he's out of the NFL.
Right.
You'd love to see him put it together. Find the maturity that he needs as a man to take advantage of the God-given athletic ability that he has. Now he's 29 years old. This is it. I mean, if this, outstanding showing there for the USFL, if that gives him another chance, this is going to be it. And you hope that he can capitalize on it. If they bring him in, where's he going to play? Who's he going to knock off the roster? I consider him an inside linebacker. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he's better or a better option than Holcomb and Roberts, who are not only are leaders, but outstanding men. Mark Robertson, who's just as athletic and just as passionate. I mean, there could be that fourth spot. I don't know. They might give him a shot. But at this point, I wouldn't hold my breath.
Well, there's also the Kwiatkowski. I said it backwards from first.
Yes, I forgot. I didn't even Kwiatkowski. Yeah, I didn't even, and I'm the one that told you how to say his name, and I forgot
it. Yeah, he's the other inside linebacker that's that's on the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. I mean, for depth, I guess he can knock off maybe Kwiatkowski. I don't know. I mean, maybe they go in with 4 or 5. I don't know. How many inside linebackers do you think the Steelers are going with if it's 3 this year?
I think they're going to go with 5 at one and 4 at the other. So it could be 5 outside guys and 4 inside guys. To me, it would be 5 inside guys because Tanner Muse is an outstanding special teams guy, and he can offer you some snaps at safety if need be. Right. And Kwiatkowski is an outstanding special teams guy, and he's a proven veteran and would be able to be a real solid, say, number 4 inside linebacker. So I would expect 5 inside linebackers and 4 outside linebackers.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, we'll see then. I mean, I do think that if Foster was given an opportunity to be go to training camp or whatnot, I think that would be a big possibility for him to be able to get on the field, with the players that the Pittsburgh Steelers have. I feel that when you look at Kwiatkowski and you look at Tanner Muse, that I think one of those guys can do a job. I don't know if you need both of them. You get what I'm saying? Like, they're both special teams guys, and I think you do okay with just one, as long as health, obviously, is there. I don't remember Foster ever playing on special teams, but I'm sure regardless, if he comes in, he's going to have to learn it.
And he'll have to, yes.
Yeah, he's not going to have that opportunity. His pedigree of being a first-round pick it doesn't mean anything at this point anymore.
Oh, no. And one thing about Tanner Muse, and I've heard it mentioned, just in hush tones, but that Muse could give them that coverage linebacker in certain packages that everybody's really concerned about. And Muse he's 4-4-1 guy.
Right.
And he can really move. And like I said, he kind of plays like a box safety, small linebacker. He's actually an upgrade for Marcus Allen from last year,
Yeah.
which isn't saying much. But I think he can actually give them some snaps on defense.
Oh, that's true. I look forward to it. I think that the guys that the Steelers have put on this team, the team that they've built, depth wise, is impressive at this point. We still got to see
Yep.
it come together. We still got to see how it works out in training camp. But to this point, it seems like they're filling up the slots appropriately. So to get back into the outside linebacker position, earlier we talked about Kevin Green and Greg Lloyd being on the field at the same time. In your opinion, which one was Batman and which one was Robin?
I think that by that point in Kevin Green's career, he was a little older than Lloyd. And like I said, to me, Green was one of the greatest pass rushers ever. I loved his intensity. He was Hulk Hogan on the field with the flowing locks and the intensity, and he would just get the crowd amped up and get his teammates amped up. But I think the better all around player, without a doubt, was Greg Lloyd. Kevin Green said the same thing at his Hall of Fame induction. He loved Lloyd and thought that Lloyd should be in the Hall of Fame. Lloyd had a terrible knee injury to start his NFL career, and he had a terrible knee injury to end his NFL career. Without that knee injuries, he would be easily a Hall of Fame player because he was going to have another monster season when he blew his knee out against Jacksonville. So, Lloyd kind of falls into that Terrell Davis, guys whose careers weren't very long because of drastic injuries, but during their time they were dominant. I mean, he was runner-up defensive player of the year 2 years in a row. 1 year he lost to Rod Woodson. I mean, he couldn't help. He had Rod Woodson on the same team as him, but that's how great he was. Greg Lloyd was a great player.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. For me, I was very young. I remember them playing. I just couldn't, I wouldn't be able to tell you without having to go back and watch some games, which one was, outside linebacker 1 and which one was number 2. But in your opinion, in Steelers history, now I know we've been talking about the best, outside linebacker, but who's been the best Robin in your opinion? Who's been that number 2 outside linebacker that can help out that main guy, in your opinion, in Steelers history?
Oh, because we've had so many great Batman.
Yeah.
So there's also been a lot of really good Robins.
True.
That's
sure.
True. If I say that Kevin Green is Robin, it has to be him because he was that great.
Right.
Now there's been guys like Jason Gilden and Clark Higgins. There's been other guys that were really, really, really good players. But no, if the best Robin ever, it would have to be Kevin Green.
I agree 100%. That's who I was going to go with. I felt that Greg Lloyd was probably the main focus point of the outside linebacker position when he was playing, and that while Kevin Green was on the field with him, that he would have been that not so much backup role, but that support system on the opposite side. The Alex Highsmith to TJ Watt, so to speak. But you brought up some names. One of them being Jason Gilden. Jason Gilden, to me, I thought was a fantastic outside linebacker. To me, Jason Gilden is probably one of the most underrated outside linebackers in Pittsburgh Steelers history. He held the sack, record for the Steelers for a while.
Yeah.
And so I felt that he was very underrated. For you, who do you think is the most underrated outside linebacker?
Well, his name hasn't even come up since I mentioned it in the original list.
Yeah.
But Joey Porter, people don't understand that he was so good. He didn't get a lot of double-digit sacks seasons with the Steelers. Mm-hmm. He was consistent about 8 or 9, 8 to 9, 10. Then when he went to Miami, he had a big, huge season with Miami where that's all they asked him to do. In Pittsburgh, he dropped into coverage a lot. You know how they use their outside linebackers then. But Joey Porter's was another super intense guy. whether it was fighting Willie Green on the field before the Browns game, whether it was trying to get Ray Lewis to come off the team bus to fight him in the parking lot. Joey Porter set the tone for those teams on defense. He carried that hard edge that the example Lloyd had set. Porter took it and ran with it. And then when Porter was gone, the guy who replaced him, James Harrison, he ran with it. There's always been that guy who set the tone for the Steelers, and it was always a linebacker. But early, it was, like I said earlier, Jack Lambert. He was the guy that set the tone for those defenses, the Steel Curtain defenses. Now, you think all them Hall of Famers on that defense. And Jack Lambert was the alpha. He was the guy who set that tone, and everybody knew it. His teammates knew it. The other team knew it. And Cliff Harris found out the hard way. So there's always been that guy. And there for a while, I've said I didn't think the Steelers had that guy. And I understand it's a different era and the rules are different. But you still have to have intensity. Mm-hmm. And you had to, I remember Ray Lewis firing up those really good defenses of the Ravens. Michael Singletary, Sam Mills, all of these great defenses always had that linebacker that was that emotional leader. And Joey Porter was that for the Steelers on them to that Super Bowl team in 2005 for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I think that Joey Porter sometimes gets a little bit overlooked or underrated because of the fact that there was such a smooth transition from him to James Harrison.
Yeah,
James Harrison. It was, in fact, I think it was against Cleveland where Porter got they kicked him out of the game before the game started.
Yeah, fighting Willie Green. Yeah, running back.
And so that was James Harrison's coming out party.
Yeah,
he ended up there. If I remember correctly, the announcer stated at the end of the game something to the effect like "Joey who?" because of how well James Harrison had done. It
was a Wally Pipp moment.
It was.
Yeah, it's like, oh Lord, man, you don't want to miss the no action because this guy's gonna take your job.
100%, and eventually he did. Joey Porter ended up going and following the bag, so to speak. Do you think that Joey Porter should be in the Hall of Fame?
It's in my heart. I want Greg Lloyd in the Hall of Fame. I want Joey Porter in the Hall of Fame. Because at one point or another during their tenure, like I said, they were the heart and soul, the adrenaline that drove Super Bowl teams. That's what I respect. That's what I look for. I look for guys that have that winning edge. A lot of guys put up mad statistics, but it doesn't mean anything. When guys come through, when it's like, the end of the game, the team's trying to drive down and TJ makes a big strip sack to finish the game, or Lamar Woodley in the Super Bowl when he got that big sack. Those are the moments that I think should be enshrined, and those type of players. And so, I think Lloyd even more so, but I would love to see Porter earn that honor.
I do too. I think he's got, I don't know if his stats are there or not. I know he came pretty close to 100 sacks. I'm not sure if he passed it or not. I think he was around that 99 range.
Mm-hmm.
Had he not gone to Miami and had he made it work out somehow in Pittsburgh, maybe he gets it. A lot of people leave the Pittsburgh Steelers and their career doesn't continue in the trajectory that it was when they were still a member of the Steelers. And I think he was one of them, but he was also up there in age. I'm looking forward to seeing his son play and seeing what he can do if he comes with the same tenacity and the same kind of energy.
Yes.
I'm excited to see that. And I think we are, when Joey Porter Jr. was drafted, there was an emotional moment there between him and his father, Peasy, where Joey Porter Sr. was telling him to use that moment as fuel, to show him that they should have selected him in the first round. And, I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see that tenacity come back. But Joey Porter, he's definitely one of the guys that I think you're absolutely right. Is very underrated and underappreciated outside of the Pittsburgh Steelers fans. I think he should be.
I got one more.
Oh, who's
And
that?
I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but Mike Merriweather
Mm-hmm.
had one of the best seasons for an outside linebacker ever for the Steelers when he had the 15 sacks. I think it was 84. And, he had like first or second All Pro 3 straight years, Pro Bowl, Defensive Player of the Year runner up. And there's, like you talked about earlier, guys leaving and their careers never being the same. Contract dispute set out a whole season, didn't play. This was before the free agency. And, he got traded the next year to the Minnesota Vikings for a first round pick and
Mm-hmm.
never approached what he did in Pittsburgh again, even though he was a quality player. I would have liked to have seen what he could have done if he'd have stayed in Pittsburgh because uh, he was a great fit for their defense.
Mm-hmm.
And before Greg Lloyd, that's who Mike Merriweather would have reminded you a lot of, and his bend coming around the end, and the way he imposed his will on the defense. I mean, on the
Mm-hmm.
offenses. So yeah, that was a big disappointment. But he's a guy that nobody talks so much about anymore. But he was really great for a short period of time.
Huh. Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't even remember him. What year did he play?
It was like 82 to
Oh,
80.
that's why.
Yeah, 85. Yeah, it was 4 year time, but he was a very good player.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, that was before my time. Uh, and I'm sure he was a fantastic player though for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Um, how do you think that the outside linebacker the linebacker position has changed over time? Do you see, those physical type, those, Harrisons and Greg Lloyds ever coming back in today's football? I know that the offense kind of, what they want to do kind of, indicate, the defense will end up trying to cover whatever the offense is trying to do. So, a push to running the ball more could bring back some of those more physical, bigger outside linebackers. Do you ever see that being position returning?
Well, with the rule changes and the focus, as we talked earlier, there is always the evolution that offensive coordinators are trying to evolve and figure out ways to attack the modern day defenses and vice versa. But used to the Steelers could take smaller, undersized defensive ends out of college, 4-3 ends, and they could
Mhm.
turn them into outside or edge guys in their system. Um, but a lot of those guys lack the foot speed to, and they never dropped into coverage at all. And it's kind of like what Mark Robertson's going through right now, trying to learn how to drop into coverage. So it's not as easy as it used to be. And you're seeing a more of a hybrid linebacker,
Mhm.
guys who can play like Nick Herbig. We don't know where he'll settle eventually. He might settle at off ball, or he might stay at edge. But there's a lot of those guys around that size that that can offer you some flexibility and creativity on defense. So I think that would probably be what we're going to see. We're going to see guys that you can move around the formation,
Mhm.
and teams want their pass rushers, whether you're a 4-3 or whatever, you want your set pass rushers, and you're not really worrying about them dropping back into coverage much like the Steelers outside linebackers have for years.
Right. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. And like I said, also, the transition. I think there is a move for offenses to go more power.
Yeah.
I think we've seen the running back position maybe not come back as far as value and second contracts or things of that nature. But I think we're as defenses moved for that hybrid inside linebacker, smaller coverage, I think offenses are moving more towards bigger bodies to, act physical, run the ball physically. I mean, look at what the Steelers have done this year. They've created a basketball team on offense, basically,
Yeah.
when it comes to,
Definitely.
everywhere. And so, I think that's going to be a push. And I think maybe there could be a move back to a more bigger physical outside linebacker. Um, but I have, one last question before we call it a show, and that um, is TJ Watt going to be the next outside linebacker to be in the Hall of Fame, or do you think that there's a possibility somebody else gets in before him?
Uh, is, at the outside linebacker position,
Yeah, just the outside
anybody
linebackers.
in the NFL,
No.
or
Just
just the
out of the
Steelers.
Steelers. Just the
Yeah.
Steelers.
Well, if anybody does, it's going to be TJ. Because I don't think, like I said, Lloyd and Porter and them guys, if they get in, it'll be later and part of the veterans committee and stuff like that. But TJ, if he can stay healthy, which that's with as we see with what happened with JJ, as they get older, those guys that go 100 mile an hour all the time and are workout fanatics, they seem like they start having strains and pulls, and ligaments can only withstand so much torque. And
Right.
and that's the scary thing. Hopefully they're going to have some depth where they won't have to use TJ as much, give him some more rest, keep him fresh throughout the season. But barring a rash of injuries like JJ suffered, TJ is destined for the Hall of Fame. Yes.
Right. So how many more years do you think TJ has? Like at least what, 4 or 5?
I would say he's got that kind of genetics, like a Kevin Green. You realize how long Kevin Green played.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why his numbers were so, TJ's not that old.
Right.
And so I can easily see 4 years, barring injury, of high level play, and then we'll have to see.
Right. So, I mean, we're looking at 9 years down the road, 9 to 10 years where he would be inducted. You don't think that's enough time to get a James Harrison into the Hall of Fame? Do you think James Harrison will ever get into the Hall of Fame? I think he's got the hardware. He's got the Defensive Player of the Year award. He's got a tremendous amount of sacks. He changed the game while he was there. He was highly penalized because of it.
Yeah.
And, I think that there's an argument for James Harrison to be in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, I think he should be. He wasn't always real warm and fuzzy with the media. No. Well, the problem with that is Lloyd wasn't either. What happens is they're the ones that vote. And, sometimes they take things personal and they don't want to vote them in and they make them wait. So that's my only concern with Debo is that people's going to make him wait because they didn't like him.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. I mean, like I said, he changed the game. He was he put his force out there on the field, penalized, tremendously, over penalized. He sneezed the wrong way. He was getting a flag and a fine at a certain point in his career. He's a Defensive Player of the Year, Super Bowl champion.
Biggest play,
career length.
Biggest defensive play in Super Bowl history.
100%. I mean, that could have been another question is, who had the biggest play
that's why he should be linebacker. There.
Exactly. 100%. I mean, the mind game that he played, and it's not just it's the biggest moment against a opponent that made it to the Super Bowl. So the opponent was worthy, and Kurt Warner ended up being a Hall of Fame quarterback that he intercepted and took back to the house. And I believe the ball was going to Fitzgerald, who's probably
he's a Hall of Famer. Yeah.
Hall of Famer as well. And so he should be in that mix.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And,
yeah.
and Thomas is right. That play was all him. It was. He was going to come in. He saw what he saw, went back, had the interception, and took it to the house. I think it was I can't remember the cornerback that was trying to take the ball away from him, but he ended up taking it to the house.
Was that William Gay?
I don't remember if it was Gay. I
think it was trying to take it away,
Yeah, it may have been Townsend. It may have been Deshae, but one of them was one of them was trying to take the ball away, and he just kind of pushes him. Was like, no, and it was funny because it looked like in all of the excitement and everybody jumping around, I think they forgot about him on the field.
He's just laying there.
He's just laying out. And so, and absolutely right. I mean, he was the Defensive Player of the Year that year as well. And so I think he should get in. I think that, he has an argument to get in. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it.
Well, that brings up the question that we have to finish this with. And I'll let you go first. Who's the greatest outside linebacker in Steelers history?
Currently, right now, I would have to say because TJ Watt's career isn't over yet,
Yeah.
and right now he doesn't. It looks like he's going to be that guy. But oh, man, that's a hard one.
It's hard. That's what I'm saying.
It really is. I think I made like the best, argument for James Harrison because he had so many great things that happened. But I would have to say, um, man, that is a difficult question to answer. I would you TJ because you can't answer that question. It's so dang hard. I would say TJ Watt, even though his career is not over yet. For me, just because I haven't seen Jack Ham or any of the greats from back in the day, I'm gonna have to go with TJ Watt. And also that has to also come with the fact that I'm banking and betting that he's going to continue at a very high performance level for a few more years. What about you?
Well, as you know, and I think we both agreed, Greg Lloyd was my favorite
Right.
ever. I think Jack Ham is the most underrated great player ever because people just do not realize what made him special, and you actually had to watch him to appreciate it.
Right.
And he, here's a Hall of Fame guy, 4 Super Bowls. It's hard to argue against that. But for me, I have to go with Debo, James Harrison, just because when he was dominant, and he had his dominant games and his dominant plays, he did things that no player his size ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And they were winning plays. And he brought that intimidating factor that Lloyd had and some of these other guys. And that play was just that play in the Super Bowl kind of seals it. But because, like I said, that's the immaculate reception on defense for the Steelers. So, I would have to go with James Harrison.
Yeah, and it's not a wrong answer. It's not a wrong answer.
And it's so hard. But just when you think of those dominant stretches that Debo had, I can't. I have to go with him.
Yeah, and I don't blame you for that. And like I said, that was probably it's just difficult because Debo wasn't that high on my top 5. You know what I'm saying? He's like maybe number 3, number 4. I have Greg Lloyd above him. I have TJ Watt above him. I even have maybe Joey Porter right at around the same, with James Harrison on my top 5.
Yeah.
I have them tied for 3, I guess. And so, but there is that argument that in the biggest moments against the players that became Hall of Famers, he rose to the occasion. And in that big year as well was one of the main reasons why the Steelers ended up getting that 6th Lombardi. And so, you can't. There's no wrong answer in that question.
That's the key to remember. There is no wrong answer, because I'm seeing all kind of names popping up, and when you're talking about them guys, there's no wrong answer.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Well, do you have anything coming up? I know. I think we talked about it earlier. You have something coming up on Wednesday, right?
Yes, the curtain call. So check that out at 8:30 on YouTube or later on, on audio. So,
well, I appreciate you, Shannon. This was a good one. Next week we're talking centers.
I'm looking forward to it.
You don't want to miss that one. So make sure you like and subscribe and ring that notification bell. That way you're notified when we go live. Shannon, take us out.
Everybody have a great 4th.